I'm back at the airport, and it felt fitting to make this video. So for those of you who don't know, I traveled around Asia for 8 months after high school, all by myself. Yeah, that's right. It was one of the hardest, most incredible, most difficult, most exciting things that I've ever accomplished. And you don't get to say that about many things that you experience. So I would often get questions from people like, why are you traveling alone? Don't you get lonely or bored? And even family members would say, like, why don't you bring a friend with you? So here's the thing. I learned the hard way that it's much worse to go with somebody whose company you don't enjoy than to go alone. I've been on many family trips and trips with friends, and it just ended up very, very disappointing, and everybody was at each other's throats by the end of it. But a few trips that I took alone to Montreal or to France and even to Asia, they were all experiences that I cherish and will cherish for a long time. And they couldn't have happened had I been with somebody that I knew. So here are my 5 reasons I travel solo. Number 1, self-discovery. When you're on the road, you learn a lot about yourself. There's a lot of time to just sit back and think about who you are as a person and what you really like and don't like. And I never realized how much I really liked hiking, or that sometimes I get really anxious. And in those 8 months alone, I learned more about myself than I did in those 18 years I stayed at home with people that I knew. There's a huge amount of learning opportunity and growth that happens when you're by yourself and you have to figure things out for the first time without anyone's help, and you're in a foreign country where no one speaks English and you're completely out of your comfort zone. And it's just an incredible way to discover yourself. Number 2, reinvent yourself as many times as you want. So this one's my favorite, and I'm going to preface it with a story. So when I was hitchhiking in Pakistan, I realized that the locals would treat me different once they realized that I'm Canadian and haven't actually been to Pakistan for a decade. And once they got whiff of that, they would treat me really differently. Or once they heard my accent, they would treat me really differently. So I would try something. When I was hitchhiking and the car stopped, they would speak to me in Urdu, and I just pretended that I only spoke English. And I just said, hi, can you drop me to the next town? And that I don't have any money. And they were incredibly friendly and enthusiastic about getting to know a foreigner. However, when I was presenting myself as a Pakistani who knows the local language, they would not be too interested or too excited to meet me. And that's fine, to each their own. I just thought it was super interesting, and I just had to experiment. There were many times where I tried a different style of talking, or a new batch of jokes, or a different way of approaching somebody. And the thing is, when you're with somebody that you know, it's really hard to get away from that intimidation and that fear of judgment to try a different character of yourself. And it's just a really interesting way to approach it. You get to play as many different characters of yourself as you want, and none will be the wiser. And the thing is, had I been with somebody I knew, the fear of intimidation of them judging me would make me hesitate to try anything else, and I would just do the usual the entire time. So that was something that was incredibly eye-opening. You don't limit yourself when you're by yourself. It's just you who puts your limits on yourself. And if you're adventurous and if you're willing to try something, you can exceed your limits and see how much you can grow and where you'll go from here and experience new things in a different way that you might not have had you limited yourself or had somebody else's judgment or fear of that judgment limited yourself. Number 3, you make friends along the way. So don't get me wrong, I don't hate people and I do have friends. You just gotta trust me on that one. But here's the thing, you meet all sorts of interesting characters on the road. I met people that have been traveling for years, decades even. I met old couples who barely spoke any English from Korea or from Japan, and they would be traveling just by themselves even though they have a huge language barrier. I met this dude who was younger than me, driving a car from Germany to Kazakhstan and back. You meet so many crazy, exciting people on the road who are super inspiring, and you're never really alone. There's so many people to interact with and to get to know and to be friends with. And that's what I love about this experience. Traveling solo just means that you're not attached to anything or to anyone, but you're completely open to making friends along the way. And you have a huge network that spans the entire world now because your friends are from everywhere, from all corners of the globe. And that's just super exciting. And if you stay in touch and then end up going back to that city and hanging out with them, it just comes full circle, and it's like you're traveling all over again and meeting new people all over again and catching up with old friends after a long time and seeing where your lives took you in different directions. Number 4, it's more convenient. So here's the thing, when you're hitchhiking, or when you're trying to grab that last seat on the bus, or you're trying to buy that last train ticket, it's much easier when you're a single dude or gal than it is if you're 2 people or 5 people. It just logistically makes their lives much harder to fit in 5 people or 2 people. But if they were to make a seat for 1 person in the busy restaurant, or to squeeze 1 person at the back of the bus, or to have you sit in their full car when you're hitchhiking, they're much more willing to accommodate 1 person because it's just easier for them. And maybe you save $1 here in terms of reservations when you have more than 1 person to split the cost, but you lose $1 there and you lose opportunities in other places because you're more than 1 person and the logistics don't add up and are not in your favor. So, number 5, flexibility. When you are hanging out with somebody and all of a sudden you meet another group of people and they're gonna do a trip to this place, but you and your friend had already planned your trip 3 weeks in advance and you're going to X, Y, and Z, and you can't make a run-of-the-mill all of a sudden trip to this other place with these new people that you met, that sort of breeds FOMO. Now, I'm not encouraging that. I'm just saying that if you want to do something on the whim, when you're 1 person, it's much easier to do that. And if you don't have any set plans, then the world is your oyster. It's a blank canvas and you can draw your itinerary and mess around with it and then flip it upside down at snap. And it's just much more flexible. And if you're down the street getting street food and your friend does not want to eat scorpions or does not want to sit at this restaurant, does not like spicy food, or is a vegetarian, nothing wrong with that. Or does not want to go on this adventure, or does not like hiking, or etc. It's sort of disappointing to have to not follow your ambitions or to do what you want to do because somebody else is going to feel left out because you're not there with them while they sit at home or sit in the hostel or want to eat at McDonald's instead of eating at some local restaurant that probably tastes 100 times better. So to each their own, but there's just much more flexibility when you're solo. Okay, so here's the thing. I find for me, solo travel is exciting, it's open, and it's invigorating. I don't find it as limiting or as lonely or anything like that. there's so much potential for growth and excitement and meeting new people and going on adventures that is much harder to do when you're not solo. It can be done, but you and the other person really have to know each other and tolerate each other for that amount of time. And if you can do that, that's great, good on you. But I found that in the few trips that I took alone were the best experiences of my life. And I used to be afraid of going to places alone. It was only when I couldn't find a person to go to the movies with when I was 12, I just decided to go alone. And I've been going alone ever since. And it's the best experience. You don't have to wait for anybody. Everything's up to you. You can decide when to get there. You can decide what to eat. You can decide where to go after. Everything's up to you, and there's nobody holding you back. And no one's going to hold you back on purpose. But it's when you hold yourself back is the worst thing. And when you travel solo, the opportunity for growth is immense. And even though you would hold yourself back, the amount of growth and the amount of opportunities that exist outside of your comfort zone and outside of your circle are grand and limitless. And there's no way you should pass up on those. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm gonna catch my flight to Beijing now, but if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe and shoot me a message. Yeah, I'd love to chat. Anyways, peace. See ya.